But when you give birth to what God has put inside of you, it's so powerful. Because Hannah suffered so much scorn and contempt from people because she wasn't able to conceive. She went to pray day in, day out, and people mocked her and said, "Are you drunk? Why are you speaking loudly?" Until she gave birth to a son who was a miracle. And that son went on to do great things. Because I feel I've been in that position many times. You're praying, yearning for something. You're in a position, you're scorned and mocked because your position is different.
Hey, Figuring It Out family. Thank you so much for joining me for another exciting conversation. Today, I bring on a very special guest to give me a few seconds to minutes to read her very powerful bio. Beverley Nambozo Nsengiyunva is a transformative force in the fields of communication, writing, poetry, and public speaking. Since founding Rich Diction Enterprises Limited in 2022, she has trained nearly 1,500 individuals and over 40 companies in public speaking and team building. Her journey as a literary advocate began in 2009 with the creation of the Beverley Nambozo Poetry Award, a platform dedicated to elevating Ugandan women through publications, prizes, and festivals. This initiative evolved into the Babishai Niwe Poetry Foundation in 2015, expanding its reach to promote, publish, and support African poets across the continent. Beverley holds a distinction in creative writing from Lancaster University, UK, and was honored as Uganda's BBC Commonwealth Games Ambassador for Poetry in 2014. Her commitment to public speaking was further solidified when she became a Toastmaster in 2016, where she not only professionalized her own skills, but also played a pivotal role in establishing new clubs in Uganda and the region. During her tenure as Public Relations Manager, she founded Sauti ya Toastmasters, the East African Toastmasters newsletter. As a professional speaker and poet, Beverley's influence spans globally. She regularly performs at renowned festivals, delivers keynote addresses, and conducts training sessions and moderates discussions. Residing in Kampala, Uganda, Beverley is a dedicated wife and mother of four who, in her leisure time, enjoys swimming, long walks, and engaging in deep conversations. Figuring It Out family, please join me in welcoming the amazing Beverley to our conversation today.
Greetings, everyone. Good evening. It's evening here in Kampala. Whatever time it is, sending you sunshine, sending you beauty. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. It's a little bit of a tradition here at Figuring It Out to start every conversation with an icebreaker. And since we're going to be having a conversation around the power of questions, I thought it would be great if you could tell us if you are a superhero whose superpower was asking the best questions. What would your superhero name be, and what would your catchphrase be?
My superpower name would be Rev Bev.
Rev Bev.
Because there was a time when I was learning about Christianity, I combined the poetry and the rhythm of words, which I loved, with a symbol of Christianity, Reverend, Rev Bev, because then a pillar of knowledge, a pillar of extending understanding in the Word of God, and a pillar somebody can lean on.
I love that. I really love that. Now imagine you as that superhero were hosting a dinner party with a group of celebrities, let's say a table of 5, right?
Yes.
Who would they be? And what is the first question you would ask them?
I will pick people, whether or not they're famous or celebrity, because celebrity in different countries means something else. In some countries, it means that you have gained your popularity from being sleazy, a cheap shot. Other places, you have built a formidable talent or skill. Dead or alive?
Dead or alive?
All right. One of them will be my father. He passed away in 1991. Another person would be, I really love this question, would be Eminem. One of the best lyricists in the world. I love lyricism. If I could rap with as much genius and share the same stage, woo. Thirdly, I would invite Tebogo, the Olympic medalist from Botswana, because the way he tore through the 200-meter dash towards the end was mind-blowingly phenomenal. I would need him at the table.
Okay.
I would also invite the twin sister I never had, but I believe I should have had. There's something about knowing that there's someone who looks like me and we can have so much fun together. The fifth person would be Hannah in the Bible, because Hannah suffered so much scorn and contempt from people because she wasn't able to conceive. She went to pray day in, day out, and people mocked her and said, "Are you drunk? Why are you speaking loudly?" Until she gave birth to a son who was a miracle. And that son went on to do great things. Because I feel I've been in that position many times. You're praying, yearning for something. You're in a position, you're scorned and mocked because your position is different. But when you give birth to what God has put inside of you, it's so powerful.
Wonderful. And what is the question that you would ask them?
I'd ask them, who are you?
Okay.
Because I'd want to know, do they define themselves by what they do? Or is there something else that defines them that then enables them to do what they do? I'd ask, who are you?
That sounds like by the time they get that question answered, that dinner would be worth your money. Really good, really good. Yeah. Thank you, Beverley. Thank you so much. So today I feel so privileged to have you here on this show.
Thank you.
Because I would love to discuss with you the power of asking questions. As a poet, as someone who is in the expressive space, in the creative space, you are touching lives, empowering people through speech and public speaking. You felt like the right woman to bring to the show. So I think the first question I would like to ask you is, how do you think curiosity, driven by the right questions, fuels creativity in both public speaking and poetry?
Great. Well, the right question depends on circumstances, depends on a person's situation, what they desire. What may be a right question at a certain time to a right person may be different for another person, because we're at different spaces at every time. Curiosity drives that because it means that our minds are working, and that we are contributing to knowledge, first to ourselves and then to other people. And I think it's important first. Many times we look to serving, give, but first make sure you're replenished. And when you're curious and you ask questions and then find answers to them by seeking mentorship, by reading, finding guidance, then that knowledge can then be applied in other spaces and you ask other people. That's what curiosity does. It really churns your inner intellect.
Yeah, I hear you. And from your perspective, and especially in the field that you're working in, do you feel that our younger ladies, so I always hope with every show that there's a young Aggie and there's a young Beverley watching and learning from us. Do you feel that that younger Beverley or Aggie is empowered to ask the questions that they need to be asking? And if not, how can we help them to get there?
There's some who are empowered and there's some who are not. There's some who feel strong in certain seasons of their lives, and there's some who feel weak and vulnerable, incapacitated to even go through the next hour of the day. And so it depends on where they are at that moment. I believe that increasingly, instead of creating powerful moments, let's create powerful lives and individuals. As a public speaking trainer, I like to say, don't work towards delivering a great speech only. Work towards becoming a great speaker. Extend that for life. To be able to ask questions in the right spaces which are impactful, be on the journey of learning and unlearning continuously. Read books, pray, ask from those experienced.
Yeah.
So that constantly your mind is filled with right spaces and right questions, not just for one occasion, but always. And while that is ideal, it is possible. One day at a time. Keep reading every day, not just for an occasion. Keep learning. Keep traveling. Ask questions about yourself. Learn from experts. Spend time with the right community of people.
After having lived abroad for a while, you came home and you seemed to be the most curious kid in the crowd, right? And that came off a little bit strange. So I'm curious to know, why was that? Why is it that you, with your creativity and with your curiosity, you were all of a sudden out of place simply because you were asking questions? What do you think brought that situation about?
When we grew up in London, people used to ask questions. When I came back to Uganda with my siblings, my family, and I found that Ugandan children were not raised to ask questions the way we were, it was strange, because then it meant, what kind of connection do they have with their parents? For me, I thought, if you don't ask questions, one, how do you learn? Secondly, when you need to know something, where do you go for your source of knowledge? Isn't it important for the source of knowledge to come from asking questions? And I thought maybe because of different cultural upbringing and socialization, that's why it's different. It was strange to me.
Yeah.
And I encourage my children to ask questions a lot.
How do you deal with children who ask questions and they are seen as disrespectful or rebellious or out of the box-ish? What advice would you give to that child out there who is just as curious as you are at the time?
It's unfortunate that children would be called rebellious because they're asking questions. I understand if they're being petulant and naughty, but most times they're asking questions because they want to know. And while a parent or guardian may be exhausted, answer them, because if they don't get it from you, they'll get it from somewhere else, which may not be as conducive an environment. I would say, if you're a type of child who likes asking questions and you may not receive the appropriate answers at any time, get a diary and start writing what you feel. That diary will be engaging, and that diary will be a place where you can build your word knowledge base. It will also be a place where you connect with your thoughts, and you'll watch how those thoughts build from the anecdotes that you write daily.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So since you're in the public speaking space, I have seen a lot of public speakers fall into the trap of speaking, and not necessarily listening and asking questions. So how do you encourage those that you train to bring in that interactive aspect where they are not just, talking at their audiences, but are also open to receive some feedback? How do you work around that?
That's a great question, because often when I get people interested, one of the first things they want to learn is, I want to be eloquent, I want to be confident. And I say eloquence is number 20. Don't work towards being eloquent. Find your authentic voice. Yeah. Who are you? What does the Bible say? I may speak in the tongue of angels, but have no love. You may be eloquent, but you're not communicating. Work towards communicating. And you can only communicate when you know who you are. Who you are, bring that, connect with the person in the audience. We are changing the order. We want to be eloquent. Wow, everyone, get an applause. No, not at all. Who are you? When you get up to speak, who are you? Why were you chosen and not anybody else? There must be a reason. And when you know that, then you know what to say, how to connect with them, And then you can learn the eloquence after you have learned all of that. And when you know who you are, then it's easier to listen to other people when they speak because you're comfortable.
So you said eloquence is at number 20.
Even number 30.
Okay. So who you are is at number 1. Why
Yes.
you were chosen is hopefully at number 2. What is
Yes.
at number 3, 4, and 5? I'm just hoping that a person listening to us can walk away with a cheat sheet
Yes.
of how to become a great communicator.
I always say the 5-finger rule, and it's applied in different concepts of life. Who, why, what. When you know why you've been called, maybe you're an expert because of a season in your life or a season in the community's life, you'll know why. How will you deliver it? How are you going to deliver this message? Are you going to be animated? Are you going to use PowerPoint presentations? Are you going to sing? Are you going to use body language, role play? Are you going to engage the audience? How will you deliver that the message is delivered impactfully? How? And there are many ways of knowing how. First, know why. Who are you? Why were you called? Who are you speaking to? Because when I train 11-year-olds, it's far different from how I train a company of corporates, for example. Yes. And then when matters. There's a time in a country when there are particular tragedies taking place. If you're speaking at that time, be cognizant, be mindful, and commiserate, because there are people in the audience who may have lost loved ones. If it's a season of triumph, if it's a season of celebration, Christmas, be mindful and let people join in celebration with you. Wish them season's greetings. Bless them. Wish them a wonderful holiday with their children in that season of Christmas or Easter. When matters. It may even be as minute as, is it afternoon? Is it morning? Is it night time? Yes. And also physical spaces and virtual spaces, the energy shifts sometimes. You have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of that. Many times, and people don't realize this, you actually need more energy for virtual spaces than you do in physical spaces, because you are driving all the energy in the room alone. But in a physical space, there's the person at the drum, there's the DJ who will play music when there's a gap, you have people who will clap for you and you hear the clap. When you're in a virtual space, you have to engage all of that on your own. People think virtual spaces are more relaxing. No. As someone who has trained in both, I'll tell you sometimes you need more energy in a virtual space.
Yeah. I want to come back to the energy side of things, but you mentioned the 5-finger rule, and I would like to zoom in on the how, because in certain cultures, there's a sensitivity towards the how, the tone of voice and the way you formulated you constructed your sentences and so on and so forth. And this makes people very sensitive around how they communicate, because they want to learn the message and maintain that connection. So can you speak to us about the finest, most global way to learn that how, so that people understand what is the thinking that is going on, what is the formula that a great communicator has in their minds when they are going about that how?
I would say, look at your skills. I'm a poet, and there are many times I use poetry to extend my messaging. I like sound and music. When I'm training children, if there's a drum in the house or one of them plays guitar, I'll tell them, bring the instruments, and we use that to engage and learn public speaking. What I use are extensions of what I like, what I value, what is important to me. Because I like to travel and I like to hear stories about travel, I will often use stories about places I've been, which may be 3 hours away from Kampala or 13 hours away from Kampala, which may be by road, by water, or by air. I use that because I like the stories of travel across borders or across my home area.
Yeah.
Other people will use sport as a metaphor, and they'll explain how they went hiking, mountain climbing, because that's an extension of who they are. They use the stories of their physical feats, which is what they engage in a lot. And when you do that, you become authentic.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be able to confidently tell a story about farming Arabica coffee because I haven't a clue, but I know people who are experts and I will listen to them. Do you see how eloquence is not even in the picture? Number 20, we are still on the important fundamentals. When you know all of this, then you can learn the eloquence, the poetry of language, the transition, enriching your vocabulary. But the 5 questions are important first.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you so much for sharing that. You spoke about energy. And I remember listening to TD Jakes talk about energy and how he would literally pass out after a public speaking event because he had poured so much out. So speak to us a little bit about that and tell us, how do you replenish?
When I am speaking and engaging, I always need to unwind and go in a corner, 30 minutes, an hour. And how do I engage with myself and wind down? I get my notebook and thank God for the many things that went on during that time of speaking, how I interacted with the people, the praise reports, and also areas where I could have done better. And then sometimes, maybe for 30 minutes, I'll just sit back and allow my body to regain its physical strength because it's exhausting. I will take tea, something to re-energize me, fruit, but I need to be quiet. I cannot go to a space, into a party, or speak with people. No. Unless if I am engaging with someone, it's someone who understands my revitalization process, and therefore I've invited them into this quiet time because they respect it, they appreciate it, and they understand the process.
You're speaking about silence and replenishing, and a lot of people think that communication is just about the talking side of things. Talk to us about the power of silence and quietness when it comes to communicating, and even when you've posed a question, why it's important perhaps to enrich it with a silent pause for the other person to have perhaps more room to formulate their response and so on.
Silence means many things. Sometimes it's not even to allow another person to respond or because you're listening to them as they speak. Silence could be you're allowing your own depth of words to sink into yourself. For example, there are times I may say a word, I may volunteer a message, and in that moment, even me, the impact on my emotional and spiritual being is heavy. I need a moment for it to sink in. Because I am my first audience. We don't realize that as speakers, but we are our first audience. And while we speak a lot, we don't see it, but there are times when the speaking is so deep. It's not even preaching. It's so deep and impactful spiritually that you also need a moment for it to sink in, for it to distill before you continue with the conversation.
Yeah.
So I believe the silence is for you first, and then it's for others as well to be part of that silence, which is a powerful form of communication.
Yeah. And you probably have spoken to some of your students and talked to them about the need to get comfortable with silence when communicating. I'm learning this through my journey with this show, because sometimes when you're talking to somebody and they pause, sometimes for effect, sometimes for because they're processing, it is easy to get uncomfortable and want to fill that gap. Talk to us a little bit about how to exercise the muscle of being comfortable with another person's silence.
When someone is silent, it's better not to look them in the eye, because looking them in the eye means you're expecting them to continue with the entertainment or the speech. Don't. Allowing them to be silent means your body language also shifts. You lean back and you politely look on the ground or avert your eyes from them directly, so that you don't give them the expectation that they have to continually be speaking and be animated. Body language matters. And whenever I give my students a task or I ask them a question and they need time to respond, I may say, take your time. Sometimes I will say, if it's a virtual training, I'm going to take off the video now. When you're ready, put the video back on and we'll continue.
Very powerful. Can you share a moment with us when a question, whether it was asked by you or to you, led to a significant transformation in your work or life?
A question asked to me led to a transformation. Transformation is a long period of time. I think the question is
a paradigm shift or an aha moment.
Yes. An aha moment. That's a great one. A lot of it has to do with who are you? What value do you have to give? And while I felt I knew the value because of my gifts in communication, writing, and speaking, I didn't know how those gifts could actually be turned into value. Maybe I did, maybe I wasn't intentional. And so it's just turning my gifts intentionally valuable assets for myself and for those in the community. Another aha moment was understanding how my gifts can be used to generate income so that my family and I live a good life, but also that that income can be used to generate riches, which can be used to create wealth. Because when a person creates wealth, they not only have money, but they're living a life of value and passing that value on to others. I don't want to be just rich. I want to be wealthy, using my money as an asset to the community by creating structures that can benefit the community, by creating systems that will transform the community positively. And that has been an aha moment, understanding my values, but also knowing what it means to create wealth, which is using your resources for value.
Yeah. I like that you say that, because when it comes to speaking, communicating, asking questions, people talk a lot about tell your story, tell your authentic story. And I say, question if your story has value, and if it has value to add, then tell your story. Because, for example, if you go through a calamity or something like that, and then your reaction to that is to turn to drugs, your story is not yet ready to tell. It will be ready to tell when you get that curve and discover that you have it in you to overcome. And then you put that to work and you come out strong on the other side. Now your story is ripe to tell, right? So going back to the list 1 to 20, right? Where are we in terms of shaping our stories in such a way that they add value to the person that is listening to them? And how do we go about that?
I love the question. May I add that different spaces permit stories in their entirety, but also maybe if the story is incomplete and the journey is still in progress. Because let's think of Alcoholics Anonymous. When people go there, it's because their story of recovery is incomplete and they need to share that story so that they receive the right support. And that is what an authentic story is. What is the story? Why are you sharing it? Why are you sharing it with these people? In other words, who are the people? How are you going to share it? Are you going to share it in a way that shows I'm already a victor, I don't need you? Or are you going to share it in a way that makes you vulnerable enough? Because that vulnerability will enable you to get the support you need. the 5 questions again. And so different stories are required in different spaces. Some may be complete, some may still be in progress, because that is necessary for the person to receive the support they need.
Yeah. I just got a training right there. Beverley, I have to say you are dropping so many gems. I don't think I can keep up with taking notes of all the wonderful things that you are saying. I would now like to transition to the subject of critical thinking. In today's fast-paced world, how do you think we can encourage more critical thinking through the practice of asking better questions?
That's fantastic. Thinking can be learned, because with the transformation of our minds, we're able to articulate what thinking can do and the power of its potential. When our minds are in the space of being renewed daily through reading, through understanding, and through just letting your mind rest, we can then ask the right questions, because your mind needs to be settled to be in the right space to ask. We're so scattered, so less is more. People often want to add one more activity and one more activity, thinking they're doing better. No, replenish yourself by resting. Take a rest, revitalize your mind, so that the right questions, the right conversations, the right thought processes are able to be articulated.
Yeah, that's really great that you share that. One of my favorite books is Joseph Murphy's Power of the Subconscious Mind. And in there, he talks about exactly what you are sharing, the importance of stepping back, coming down, and in that space of rest, the right questions and the right ideas start to come to the surface. So I feel like there's a confirmation there. I want to ask you, because you're a mom of 4, and I don't know if you remember that show that was called Kids Ask the Darnest Things.
Oh, I loved it. Yes.
Me too. I love the fact that you have raised your kids with that freedom of asking questions. Yes. Can you share one of the strangest, funniest, weirdest questions that your kids have asked you and how you responded to them?
Yes. One time, they know my journey of exercise. I'll exercise early in the morning while they're still asleep, or I'll go for a long walk and I come back. They know about my journey of exercise. If I'm exercising in the bedroom, sometimes they'll come and join me. In between those phases, sometimes my obesity is reflected in the tummy. And so my last born said, "Mommy, are you pregnant?" The second last born said, "Mommy's in her 40s. How can she get pregnant?" They don't know that both of them were conceived and I was delivered of them in my early 40s. That was what was so bizarre. They're too young to realize that. But oh my goodness, these two are the children I had in my early 40s. But it was so sweet and so innocent, and from their observation and little knowledge they may have of women and childbirth.
When you speak about your child seeing your tummy and you walking out and her asking you something like, "Are you pregnant?" How do you train your children to limit their I'm going to say embarrassing, in quotation marks, to limit their embarrassing questions to you? Because you definitely don't want your kids going around asking every person that has a little bit of weight around their tummy if they are pregnant. You know what I mean?
Yes. I wouldn't limit them. It's interesting. I wouldn't limit them, because I've seen that phase of asking embarrassing questions is so short-lived. And many times, if it's from the age of 4 to 6, it may only occur twice in a lifetime of a child. It's not every day they'll ask it. And I wouldn't limit them, because the adult who is receiving this embarrassing question should be able to know it's just a phase. I had traveled somewhere, for example, and I was pregnant with my firstborn. My dark skin was a shade darker. Pregnancy did that to me. And there was a young boy running around speaking in a language I couldn't understand. His mother was visibly embarrassed. And she said, "I'm so sorry. My son has never seen anyone of your skin tone. That's why he's doing that." It was okay. It was perfectly okay. Because my children sometimes at a certain age have also stared at people of a different skin tone because it's new to them and they're curious about it, you see.
Yeah.
And I really told her, don't be embarrassed. It's really, and it really was genuinely okay. Yeah.
I
And that
celebrate
boy,
that.
yes. And he might do it once in his lifetime at that age. Let them be.
Yeah.
Unless you are raising them to be toxic towards other people. But otherwise, that childhood innocence, it occurs seldom. That's what I believe.
Yeah. And I mean, the way that we handle those kinds of situations can be very defining, because the child might then cringe and never ask questions. Even the
Yes.
not
Yes.
so embarrassing ones get lost
Yeah.
in the process, right? Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. I want to switch to vulnerability, because when we ask questions, depending on the kind of question that we're asking, sometimes we might be touching a place that is sensitive. So at the start of the show, I asked you the 5 people that you would invite to your table. And interestingly, you said you would invite Hannah, right? The biblical character.
Yes.
Now, imagine how many people are meeting Hannahs today, and they're asking them that heavy question that Hannah is not ready to answer because it's too painful a place to go, right? Educate us around the vulnerability, the types of questions we as adults need to give a second thought to before we ask.
We have to find out, where are we? Because an adult is aware. Sometimes they want to hurt people. Sometimes they're curious. Sometimes they're unaware. A question may be culturally insensitive, and genuinely an adult was not aware. Therefore, there are 2 things. One, you ask the question and what happens afterwards. If you can see that a person is upset by it, then let your response be rapid to apologize. If your intent is to be malicious, to be spiteful, to create a reaction, then you will be smug when you get the reaction you wanted, because you are intent on being hurtful. And your response will be a smug one. And then you rationalize it by saying, I'm just asking a question, but you know that question is hurtful.
Yeah.
Don't ask questions about a woman in her 50s who doesn't have children and say, when are you having children? I was just joking. People are insensitive like that. Don't do it. You know that it hurts her. Don't go to a man and say, is it true that you're not able to, that you are fired from your last job? Has he volunteered it? Has he recovered from that process? Don't be insensitive. And therefore, there are 2 things, the question and the response from the person. Because most times as an adult, our intentions, we are well aware of them. If there's a mistake, then we should rapidly apologize if we're genuinely apologetic. But usually we are aware of the intent, and we have to be careful and mindful. Even if it's a WhatsApp question, people provoke and poke because they lack self-awareness, and they're acutely unaware of how to read the room because they don't care. It doesn't matter to them. They're so insensitive, but maybe because they're suffering from a severe loneliness themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So powerful. And I just would like now to transition to the difference between written communication versus in-person communication. So we spoke a little bit about the virtual setup and how you have to bring a whole different energy, but speak to us about the written type of communication and how that is missing so many cues that people pick up in the face-to-face setup. What are some of the tips and tricks that you use to make sure that when you are communicating in a written form, that it's landing as you intended for it to land?
That's a good one. I stopped communicating in writing when I'm angry, because sometimes I'll justify it and say this anger is justified. And then I realized, wait a second, it's not helpful. However much I may be justified, it's not helpful. And I really had to learn that. Stop communicating in writing when you're angry. I also use the edit button quite a bit, or I delete. Because I realized, hang on a second, the response I expected is not the response I'm getting. Let me delete or edit. And one thing I do as a rule, bring a salutation. We forget the importance of salutations. And we say, Aggie, I'm waiting for the book. Please leave it at the hotel. Thanks. My goodness. But if you say, hey, Aggie, how are you doing? Please remember the book. Thank you. Have a great day. You see the difference? Yeah. I'm reminding you to bring the book, but the difference in the intonation is quite vast. And yet the requirement is the same. Kindly deliver the book somewhere. And so what I do is I put a salutation. Remember the salutation. How is Aggie's day? Even though she may be having a rotten day and may not share with you those details, the salutation adds a lot. And when you say thank you, don't put THX. Thank you for the time and the information. Be specific with your thanks. Thank you for delivering the book. I can't wait to read it. Yeah. Thank you for the lift you gave me. I don't know how I'd have managed to walk in the rain. Be specific with your thanks. And that's something I learned from Toastmasters. Specificity. It really does imply authenticity.
I want to ask you a little bit about assumptions, because oftentimes people don't ask the questions that they need to be asking because they assume to know the answer. And that is the point where miscommunication starts to take place, because you are you, I am me, I think in my own kind of way, you think in your own kind of way. If we don't ask each other questions, then we're running conclusions about each other that are missing a communication aspect. So speak to us in terms of our marriages, how we interact in our workplaces, and just help us to navigate, in a few words, to navigate this space called mind reading and assuming.
We do it a lot. It always is projected from who you are. We're afraid of making other people uncomfortable because we're not ready for their reaction. You want to ask a question that may be difficult, either to your spouse, to your colleague, but you're afraid of their reaction because either they are known for responding wildly, or because you know you're in the wrong and you're afraid of the reprimanding. And therefore, it's not the other person who shares this assumption challenge. It is you, first of all, because you've created this scenario. Interestingly, when I have stepped over the threshold of anxiety and asked my questions, more often than not, I am pleasantly surprised. Even though I may be in the wrong, even though I may elicit a response which I'm not ready for, it has always been better. When I cross over the threshold, it makes me stronger, and I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. And often that comes when I'm reading the right books, especially books which channel you on how to use the strength that God gives you to renew your mind. When I'm in that space, I'm like, I am going now to do it. Oh my God. And I go back to my diary. It worked. Why was I afraid? And then you're strengthened for the next one. So it's just strengthening your muscles, strengthen your mind muscles that you're often unafraid. And the more you do it, look at Elon Musk. He's so unafraid. He's the richest man in the world. You don't get there when you're afraid. You don't get there when you're afraid. So continue to be unafraid.
Yeah. I can't help myself but ask, what is the book that you are reading currently? And then I would follow that up with, of all the books that you have read, which one has had the greatest impact on you?
Oh. I'm going to bring the book from my bag, which is right next to me.
Yeah.
All right. I'm reading Waiting by Goretti Tomohendo. This is not her latest release, but for me, when I read a book, it's the right time for me to read it because the way I ingest it is amazing. Goretti was the coordinator of FemRight, Uganda Women Writers Association, when I joined as a volunteer. And it was because of people like her, Mary Karoro Okurut, Hilda Twanjere, who were part of that space when it was starting. It's because of her that many Ugandan women writers have found their voice and have established themselves as writers. It's so important that what you're doing is your calling, not just for yourself, that you have a positive impact. You become a person of value. It's not for yourself and for your own satisfaction. That comes when you positively impact people's lives, become people of value. And because she established FemRite with other people, that value has been felt incredibly in so many Ugandan women writers living in Uganda and across the globe. And I'm reading her book, Waiting, based on the situation of a family during Idi Amin's time in Uganda. I read The Kite Runner, Khalid Hosseini, because it stunned me to the core when I thought of the atrocities, the pain, the heartache that children and families go through when there's turbulence, political turbulence in their countries. And I had never seen it through the eyes of a boy. The Kite Runner did that so powerfully, and it impacted me greatly. Another one is Anne of Green Gables. I don't know why, but I cried when I read that book. I read it in my secondary school. I cried. I was so devoted and attached to this main character in the book. I have no idea why, but it touched me so much. I cried. I cried.
What would you say to your teen self now, knowing everything that you know?
I will say, never let go of the person you've always desired to be. You've always been creative. You know that writing has always been an important part of your life. Do that. Be that. If you wake up, this is a quote from somebody, if you wake up and the only thing you can dream about is to be a writer, then you're a writer. Because I would wake up and that's the only thing I would dream about, to be a writer. I was writing stories, poetry, asking to read in assembly. When the genocide in Rwanda occurred, in my senior 4, I wrote a story and I read it to the class. A fictionalized story about a 6-year-old girl who was seated on a bucket. She was shot, and what happened is the bucket overturned. The girl had plaits. The last you could see was blood dripping, and the bucket was overturned. Her ice cream she was licking was on the ground. I shared that story because that was my way of processing and sharing a space for trying to understand this that occurred. Because we're in senior 4, what is happening next door? Many of us had never been to Rwanda. We'd only heard of it and seen it in maps as a neighboring country to Uganda. We were not even an East African community then, but that is what I used to do. That's what I'll tell them. If you wake up, even as a 15-year-old, and the only thing you can think about is being a footballer, become a footballer. If you wake up and the only thing you can think about is curing cancer, then cure cancer.
Thank you, Beverley. I can't help it based on your response, but to ask you one last one. Speak to the parents that are raising this teenager.
Yes.
That is dreaming about being a footballer, dreaming about, finding the cure for cancer. How can parents better identify what their children are passionate about and dreaming about? I mean, I'm fascinated by you the entire time because I'm thinking, when you were growing up, how many poets were in existence? How many writers, especially female writers? And to be even more specific, female Black writers. So I feel like somewhere along the lines, your parents must have played some type of role to harness this gift out of you. So talk to the parent that is watching us right now and they have this extremely creative child and they don't know how to identify, navigate, support, and so on.
I would tell them, listen to what your child is saying and listen to what they're not saying. Because a child communicates when they're engaged in activities. My eldest often writes in her diary and she often designs things. She's drawing and fashion and creating art. My third born is expressive like me. She looks for things to drum and hit. My last born is so caring that she's always willing to share her last piece of sausage with anyone. She's so sensitive and caring. My second born is quite athletic and studious. She's academically brilliant almost effortlessly. She's quiet, but academically she's brilliant and she's athletic. And she shows it in the way she concentrates on her work. Oh my goodness. Perfect handwriting. Listen to what they're not saying. And then you can start the conversations of raising them and building their talent from there.
This is a faith-based personal development channel. So I'm going to ask you to share with us your favorite Bible verse, and then we can call it a day.
I have several. I think the one I really value, but there's so many. There's so many. Well, when I am weak, then I am strong. I love that. There's so many. I also like the verse, you may come to me with spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord. And that was when David was facing Goliath and his Philistines. They came as an army ready for him. But you know what you do when an army of the enemy comes? Hit in the center of their weakness. You see, when people come in numbers to attack you, they are showing how weak they are, how afraid they are of you. Who is a one-person army? And they'll come with their armory, and they'll come with all their weapons. So many people. But the truth is, they're masking their weakness. Hit them at the center. Do not come with them with the same weapons, spear and javelin. Come for them in the name of the Lord. That's where the victory is.
Amen, amen, amen. My favorite one for you is the path of the righteous gets brighter and brighter. So may your path continue to be even brighter than it is today. Thank you so much for having given us your time.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Such a great honor meeting you. Thanks to everyone who listens. Thanks for sharing. It's been a blessing. And I know we're going to meet again, either in Germany, definitely Germany. I'm prophesying that, and we're going to meet again. I just love this.
I love it. I live right in the center of Berlin. So if you're ever here, I will be happy to spend some time with you and show you around.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Bless you too. Everyone, thank you so much for having spent your time with us. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share. And we look forward to continuing to have amazing guests like we just did. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. And I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.